Prequel.
Greetings, friends, ambassadors, Jedi, and Sith, and happy May the 4th. And welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing and a very special May the 4th be with you review. And tonight, we revisit arguably the strongest entry in the Disney franchise films, Rogue One. And if this is your first visit to the Ambassador Wing, you have tuned in on a very auspicious evening. For geeks around the world, for those of us who call ourselves Star Wars fans today, this week, and well, quite frankly, this month is a very special time for all of us. For every May, we gather together and we celebrate this thing that we all love, this thing called Star Wars. Whether you have been a fan for 40 years, for 4 years, or for 4 days, it does not matter. Because here, this evening, we look back at a film that all of us within the Star Wars community, I think, can agree is a standout. And tonight we will be spending some time to share our thoughts, our opinions, what we love about this film, what stands out to us, and just to celebrate in our own little way. May the 4th. And of course, as always, I am your host, the Ambassador. I hope you all are having a wonderful Wednesday evening. Hope you've had a good day. I know that I scheduled this stream for 6:30, but I had somewhat of a longer day at work than expected, so I did not want to postpone, so I simply rescheduled a little. So I hope none of you all had to wait too terribly long. I have included the link to this stream in the chat, so if you want to join me for this discussion this evening, you are more than welcome to do so here. So, but that all being said, I hope you all enjoy the stream. Those of you that will be watching this live, those of you that will join me this evening, and of course, for those of you that will catch the replay. And as always, if you enjoy the content I am putting out on this channel, if you enjoy the community that I have been building here over the last couple of years, and you're not yet a part of it, hit that like, hit that share, but most importantly, hit that subscribe button and become a part of the Ambassadorial Wing. I know that there were a few people that were in the chat earlier this evening. Ace Moic, I know that you were here earlier, and I appreciate you dropping by, and I hope to see you soon. If not, may the 4th be with you as well. And also to the chat, Mr. Zach Leary, a regular here, a fellow ambassador, a good friend of the channel. Good to see you. Appreciate you stopping by, bud. I hope you're having a good night, and hope you enjoy the stream, whether you catch it live or whether you catch it on the replay, regardless. But that all being said, we don't stand on a bunch of ceremony. Well, in this particular instance, we do. Because for those of you who know me, or those of you that might be new to me, Star Wars is my all-time favorite franchise, as you could probably guess. And tonight, I wanted to share my thoughts on one of the few films that Disney put out, anything in the last few years I actually truly enjoyed. And that was, of course, Rogue One. And, of course, starting off, it is easy to say that for a lot of us in the Star Wars community, Rogue One is indeed a standout. It was almost like the prequel between the prequel and the original trilogy. It was like a fourth prequel. Although In this particular instance, there are no Jedi. There's only one Sith. And this is first and foremost a war movie. This was the movie that put the emphasis on the war in Star Wars. And I have to say, when this movie was announced back in 2015, or I believe it was 2014, 2015, I was honestly very excited because we've always, for a lot of us in the Star Wars community, we always wondered what was that first victory for the Rebel Alliance? What did it take to get the plans for the Death Star? And oddly enough, of all people, it was somebody that worked at Lucasfilm that wrote this story in the first place. You could almost say that this was a high production fan fiction. And when the opportunity arose, Mr. John Knoll and I think one other individual that worked with him at Lucasfilm decided to pitch their idea for this story to the Lucasfilm execs, that of course being Kathleen Kennedy, and say, we would love to tell this story. We think the Star Wars community would love to see it. We would definitely love to tell it. And thankfully, it was greenlit. Now, this movie was released in between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And it was supposed to be the first in a series of anthology films. Now, granted, and somewhat unfortunately, only two were ever made. This one, and of course, Solo, a Star Wars story. And this film doesn't open as the normal Star Wars film normally would. It opens with no crawl, seemingly no fanfare, just simply the title, Rogue One. And this film also kind of reinvigorated or is a addition to another subgenre of war film or a film in general, and that is of course the caper film. And honestly, this is a particular subgenre of film that I honestly truly enjoy. I have watched many in my time, from Kelly's Heroes to The Dirty Dozen to the Ocean's movies, both the original with Frank Sinatra and the rest of the Rat Pack, to the series of films with George Clooney and Brad Pitt, and so on. You could also put Now You See Me, Now You Don't, those two films in this subgenre of the caper film or the heist movie, if you prefer. But in this particular instance, Rogue One takes place in the Star Wars universe. And what is the heist all about? Well, of course, it is about getting the plans to the first Death Star. This movie ties very closely and very heavily to a film that we all within the Star Wars community know and love, and that is, of course, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, or simply as it was known back in 1977, Star Wars. No number, no subtitle, just Star Wars. And I have to admit, does this film hold up several years after watching it initially? Being to as part of my celebration for May the 4th, I actually rewatched this movie today, actually this afternoon after I got home from work. Wrapped it up just a little while ago. And I have to say, it has been a few years since I watched Rogue One. And I will say, yes, it does hold up. And it's honestly, it was very refreshing to revisit a Star Wars film aside from the prequels and the original trilogy that I do truly enjoy. And over the next hour or so, depending on how long I go and just how many people decide to show up, I'm going to share my thoughts on this film, as I have already, obviously. But to start off, as I mentioned, this is a very unorthodox Star Wars film. because, as I mentioned, there are no Jedi, there's no Sith per se, except for, well, one titular Sith that makes two appearances in the entire film and has what many Star Wars fans argues is one of the greatest sequences or scenes in the Star Wars franchise, and that was, of course, Vader's hallway scene. But aside from Lord Vader's two appearances in this film, if you remove those, does this film hold up regardless? And I say with no bias, okay, a little bias. Yes, it is a very intriguing film, is an intriguing story with a group of characters that unfortunately all die, but they die for a good cause. And that is, of course, Cassian Andor, who we will be seeing here in the next few months or so, or a year or so, in the Andor series, played by Diego Luna. You have Felicity Jones as Jen Erso. You have Mads Mikkelsen as Galen Erso, her father. You have, oh, for heaven's sakes, what's his name? 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 Director Krennic. What was his name? This is going to drive me nuts. I know his name. Damn it. You know what? Hang on. I can solve this very easily. I've got the movie 2 feet away from me. So bear with me just a minute, folks. Ben Mendelsohn. Of course. Okay. Director Krennic played by Ben Mendelsohn. You've got Donnie Yen and Alan Tudyk and Jenna Wynn, and of course, a favorite character actor of mine, Forrest Whitaker, who plays a character that we are first introduced to in the Clone Wars animated series, and later he makes a later appearance in the Rebels animated series as well, and that was, of course, Saw Gerrera. Saw Gerrera also makes a appearance in the Jedi Fallen Order video game, and he is a part of the Rebel Alliance. Now, of all the characters in this film, human and otherwise, what who is by far my favorite character? I have to admit, K2SO, voiced and performed by Alan Tudyk. Now, Alan Tudyk is a actor who I have seen in numerous other films and TV shows and so on throughout his career. The film that sticks out the most to me for him is, of course, his role as Steve the Pirate in Dodgeball, and a true underdog story. But I honestly think in some instances, K2SO in a lot of ways steals the show in this movie. But there are a lot of very interesting. Okay, red leader. All right. Well, joining me this evening for the occasion is well, we'll find out in a minute. Welcome, Red Leader.
What's up, dog? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Who is it? Zach? Is that you?
Yep. What's up, man?
Hey, happy May the 4th.
So I'm outside. I hope it's not too bad.
No, I can hear you. Okay, it took a minute to figure out who the heck I was talking to. So, well, good to have you. Good to have you with me, Zach. How you? Appreciate you stopping in. So,
Yeah, of course. I don't have too long, but hang out for a little bit.
okay. Well, obviously we're talking about Rogue One, so just out of curiosity, stupid question, have you seen the film?
I have.
Okay. So
You know,
what did you think of it? Honestly.
oh, it's good, but again, it's one of those things. It's another homage. You know, it's
Hmm.
fun. It's entertaining, but something we've kind of seen before at the same time.
Okay, fair enough.
So in that way, it's somewhat reminiscent of The Force Awakens for me.
Yeah, yeah. As I can understand what you're saying. As I mentioned before you got in here, Zach, this film does stand within a kind of a subgenre of other films within cinema, and that is of course the heist film. And I rattled off several few before you came in, like Kelly's Heroes, The Dirty Dozen, the Ocean's films with George Clooney and Brad Pitt and all of them. But this obviously takes place in the Star Wars universe. So, but it does, and I think it does very effectively. It does bring a different tone to the film or to the universe because for the first time in the Star Wars universe, we see what things are like from the normal the every man's perspective, the soldier, the man on the ground. And I think that's something that we haven't seen very often, except for maybe in the Clone Wars animated series. But in this particular instance, we're seeing it from the perspective of the rebels. And that's definitely something that we miss out on in a lot of ways with the Star Wars franchise. I mean, we're always looking at it from the perspective of our heroes and the big stakes, the big overarching narrative of the story. But in this particular instance, what we have is we have a perspective from the soldier's point of view.
Yeah, well, I agree with all of your points. It would be nice to see a film follow the Empire for a change. I mean, that kind of would be an interesting opportunity. Um, I don't know. I mean, you probably most people will probably disagree with this, but if hypothetically,
Mhm.
um, let's say somehow magically I replaced Kathleen Kennedy, okay, you'd never
Mhm.
see another stormtrooper again. Really, I think it's time to explore new territory. I think I'm sick of seeing Tatooine. Darth Vader, we've been there, done that. It's cool. I like it, but it's time to kind of expand and do something new. I think we've kind of been there, done that with this movie. You know,
And I can't say I disagree with you. I mean, I know that they did some reshoots for this film. I'm not exactly sure what those reshoots entailed per se. I know that Gareth Edwards was the director on this film and that the majority of what he shot was still in the final product. But I would like to have seen his edit, his version of Rogue One and everything without the interference of Lucasfilm. But in spite of the either extensive or limited interference that Lucasfilm did do, the final project that we got, as you said, is an homage, and homage is not inherently a bad thing. It can add some added perspective to the universe or to the world that we are visiting, but at the same time, it can remove a bit of the mystique from it as well. You know,
I agree with
I
that.
so
But I think at the end of the day, we've had 6 films basically
mhm,
that
yeah.
featured kind of the same old stuff. Um, to me, it would be more interesting to kind of explore the Yuzhang Vong or get into some different aspect of the universe and kind of expand it. You look at the Clone Wars, even though it was kind of repetitive in some ways, it opened the door for an entirely new sandbox to create new stories from, which is one of the things that I think is so amazing about that particular. time period within Star Wars. But I think the only way to do that again, and as it was done with the original trilogy as well, is to create a new baseline, a new set of pillars and major stories that can be built upon through additional content.
That is very true. I think one thing that the Star Wars community, as I am a part of, obviously, would like to see is see new stories told from new perspectives. And over the last few years, we have gotten that with series like The Mandalorian and with The Bad Batch, love it or hate it. It has added a added perspective that we have not gotten before.
But
In
I'm
terms,
not talking about adding perspective though. I'm talking about adding a new dynamic. You know,
well, I would say honestly
you
that
can't do that through the past material. You have to create something new. You know,
no, I hear you.
and
I
I'm
hear you.
not bitching. I'm not complaining. Like I said, I enjoyed the film, but I just think we need something else, man. We need something new.
No, I agree. And I would say that at least the Mandalorian and maybe to a lesser degree, Bad Batch and Book of Boba Fett did give us something new, something different. It did give us a different. It did give us a look at the Star Wars universe from the underbelly, from the criminal underbelly of it, instead of from the perspective of the Empire or the rebels. And what I'm hoping is once they get past Kenobi and once they get past cast the Andor series, that they will hopefully take a step back and maybe they will listen to the fans, and in turn they will say, okay, the audience is obviously wanting something other than the same old, same old. What can we give them that's new? Not something that's based on a previous book, not something that's based on a comic or necessarily even a video game, but what can we give them that's something that's wholly new and something truly different that will perhaps engage a different dynamic of the audience?
Well, they that comes down to just hiring a group of writers. You know,
Yeah.
they they need to scout some interesting talent out there, and I think there's a lot of that. Yeah, I mean, it just needs to it needs a little refresh, I think.
Yeah, I can't say I disagree. As I was saying before you came in, Zach, this story came actually from someone that worked in Lucasfilm. It came from um a graphic artist, and that was John Knoll. He always had this idea in the back of his mind. He had this story in the back of his mind of where. Okay, that's fine, Zach. I understand. He always had this idea for where the what was the story behind that one little blurb in the opening crawl for the original Star Wars. What was that first victory like for the rebels? Exactly did they? What was that battle like? What were the stakes? What happened in the events surrounding the capturing of the Death Star's plans? And, it's oftentimes from the least likeliest corner that you get a potentially good story. And I think what John Knoll wrote with Rogue One was a story that resonated with him, but he hoped would resonate with the Star Wars fan base in general. And considering the reception of this film, I think in a lot of ways he succeeded.
Yeah, yeah, I enjoyed the film, but last thing I'll say about
Mhm.
the refresher. Um,
Yeah,
to me, it's not a coincidence that the last three TV shows have been based in Tatooine. They built this Tatooine set. It's like, oh yeah, let's use the Tatooine set. It's like, come on, guys. They've got this amazing technology. Let's go somewhere interesting. I'm sick of Tatooine. I'd like to see maybe something like Felucia, a gorgeous planet or something like that, something
Yeah.
visually stunning, Avatar-esque. And like Tarantino has said this. Many people have said this. Every great story is basically stolen, right? You steal elements, you mine different little elements that you like, and what a writer produces is an amalgamation of their taste and what they like. Um, you could even take from something like Avatar and give a story like that. Give a
Mhm.
tribal story, something interesting. I wouldn't be opposed to going back underwater. There's many things you could do that would be interesting and
Yeah.
introduce maybe new tribes. We have the Empire, we have the rebels, but give us some new organizations. Um,
I would
and
definitely
I
not
don't
be
think it's
opposed.
rocket science. You know, I
No,
really
it
don't.
isn't.
But anyways, man, it's great to see you, and have a great
Likewise.
stream. Sorry I couldn't stick around longer, but
No, I
I'll
understand.
catch you soon, man.
All right. Talk to you later, Zach. Have a good
All right,
night.
take it easy, man. Bye.
You too. Bye. And taking into consideration what Zach just said, and I do want to say hello to the chat and anything. I don't want anybody thinking they're being ignored. Just George. George, it's good to see you, buddy, as always, and happy May the 4th to you as well. It says, "Hey everyone, Rogue One is definitely my favorite of the Disney Star Wars films. Out of the Disney films, the tone and stakes felt the most like pure Star Wars." George, I can't say I disagree with you because what we have with Rogue One is a movie that does have stakes. It is a movie that you feel every death in some ways because over the 2 hour runtime of this film, you do build a connection to these characters with Jen Erso, with Galen Erso, with Cassian Andor, with K2SO even, with the two Guardians of the Wills, Chirrut Inway and Baze Malbus, with Bodhi Rook even, the defector from the Empire, the pilot. And the interesting thing is this is a very ragtag group of characters. This is a group that is by any means ordinary or even normal because they come from so many different backgrounds. I mean, obviously you have a rebel spy, you have a woman who has been on the run the majority of her life, who was at one time involved in the rebellion, but got dumped because the man that was supposed to be taking care of her realized who she was and realized that she would be a liability and left her behind. And that was, of course, Saw Gerrera, played by Forrest Whitaker. You have Bodhi Rook, who is a Imperial defector. Now, we very rarely ever in the Star Wars universe hear of a Imperial officer rebelling or a Imperial of any stripe rebelling. Now, we would see that a year previously and everything with Force Awakens in the person of Finn, but it does it does beg the question: how many people that were part of the Empire actually were a part of the Empire and didn't just simply go along with it out of fear? And I think Bodhi Rook is a character who is very complex because he he goes on this journey. Now we do get references to it throughout the film that he is talking with Galen Erso at the Imperial facility on Edu, and Galen tells him, "You can start to make things right by going on this mission, by going to find my daughter, by going to find Saw Gerrera, and get these plans, get the word out to the rebellion about what the Empire is building. Well, I have helped them build myself. You can start to make things right in your own life." And takes that chance. And honestly, speaking for myself, I'm a person who always believes in second chances for just about anybody. And what I find really interesting in this story is just about everybody that's part of the Rogue One unit gets a second chance to redeem themselves. Now, in Jyn Erso's instance, she's trying to reconnect with her father. And she is been wandering, been on the run, been hiding from the Empire since she was a kid. She hasn't had a chance to really have a family after her own got either killed or taken from her. And we see that scene at the beginning of the film where director Krennic catches up to the Ursos on that unknown world. I don't know if they ever mentioned the name of the planet specifically, but Jyn is very much alone throughout the majority of this film until until Cassian and the rest of the rebels kind of go, you know what, you're right. We need to go to Scarif. We need to get these plans and we need to destroy this weapon that the Empire has built. And for the first time in her life, or for the first time in a very long time, Jen feels like she's part of something again. And to my friend, my fellow Star Wars fanatic, Ace Mowick, may the fourth be with you, buddy. Appreciate you stopping in. So, um, the thing about this film, to kind of work through the cast, Cassian says it perfectly at several parts, particularly in the aftermath of Galen Erso's death on Edu. He's like, this fight has been a part of my life since I was 6. He's practically only known the rebellion. He's been fighting against the Empire since he was probably old enough to pick up a blaster, potentially. He admits, I have done awful things. I have done terrible things in the name of this rebellion, of this alliance. He's like, but for the first time, I am able to go on a mission where I know I am doing the right thing. And I think, again, I think that's something that we all can resonate with because each one of us here has a checkered past. We've done some things we're not proud of. We said some things to our family, to our friends, to complete strangers that we're not proud of. And we would always hope that we would be given the opportunity to make amends. And for Cassian to lay down, to risk his life to get these plans for the Death Star is his opportunity to make up for all of those questionable decisions that he's made in the name of the rebellion. And then, of course, you have Chirrut Imwe and Baze Malbus, the two guardians of the Wills. And I will say this. When I heard about some of the locations that were going to be visited in this movie, and one of those planets was going to be Jeddah, which was once a homeworld for the ancient Jedi, and then finally seeing it, it was a really cool sight, guys. I will not lie to you. Because I have always been a fanatic of the prehistory, of the lore, of the universe of the Jedi in the Star Wars universe. What was it like for those first several generations of the Force wielders? What was the world like that they existed in? What did they construct? What did they build? And to kind of see the dilapidated ruins of the Jedi temples, their homes, their libraries, their statuary, particularly monolithic Jedi statue that has toppled over, and all that's left is the upper portion of it laying sideways on its face. It's somewhat bittersweet. And then when Director Krennic orders for the Death Star to fire on Jedha City, a city that has probably existed for millennia, and just like that, it's gone. But you have these two warrior monks in the persons of Chirrut Imwe and Baze Malbus, who at one time were guardians of the Kyber Temple. And now they are aimless. They are without a cause, per se. And they go along with Galen and Cassian's group, or with Jen and Cassian's group, to Scarif. They go to Edu to potentially save Jen's father, Galen. And I will not lie, that scene where we see Chirrut take out a squad of stormtroopers, a man who is literally blind, I could not help but cheer at the conclusion of that fight, because we all know that Donnie Yen is a very skilled martial artist, and he gets to show off a little bit in that particular sequence. And I can understand why he is regarded as one of the top martial art actors in the industry today. And it gives me, honestly, incentive to go check out the Imp Man films that he has done. He had done earlier on in his career. And I will say this also. The acting in this film is honestly top notch, including from Alan Tudyk, who does the voice of K2SO, a much taller and somewhat more intimidating version of C3PO. But I will say this, the dialogue that they wrote for K2SO is spot on. Absolutely spot on. So, and Ace, I'll bring up your comment here, buddy. Donnie Yen is a badass. Yes. Yes, he is. Of all that, now don't get me wrong. All the actors, the actresses in this movie, they did a phenomenal job. They really did. But I have to say the two standouts for this entire movie have to be Alan Tudyk and Donnie Yen. Now, I liked Felicity Jones as Jen Erso. She did I think, a very good job for the character. I think she conveyed the desperation. She conveyed the loneliness that this young woman has felt the majority of her life. Yes, yes, Ace, I will agree with you there. K2SO is the best parts of C3PO and HK47. If you're, for those of you who are wondering, who is HK47? HK47 is a character from the KOTOR video games. He is in both KOTOR and KOTOR 2, the Sith Lords. And if I recall correctly, he is actually a character that you can discover and unlock in the SWOTOR, the Star Wars Online game as well. And HK47 has a very, shall we say, dark sense of humor. And I think K2SO carries that off as well very, very nicely. Of course, we do have we have two returning actors from the prequels, and that is, of course, Jimmy Smits as Bail Organa, Leia's adopted father, and also Senator of Alderaan. And of course, we have the actress who portrayed a young Mon Mothma in the prequel films as well, particularly in Revenge of the Sith. She makes a return appearance in Rogue One as, of course, Young Mon Mothma, who is at this point head or co-head of the Rebel Alliance. And I do want to speak for I do want to talk a few minutes about the political aspect of this film. In particular, when Jin and Cassian and the rest of them get back to Yavin 4 and they're debriefing with the rest of the Alliance Council, telling them what the hell's going on. Yes, yes, Ace, I will agree. 3PO's cameo counts. Yes, it does. For all of us, I think, especially for myself, when the rebels are getting ready to head for Scarif and they pan over and you see R2 and 3PO, and 3PO's like, where are they going? Scarif? Why are they going to Scarif? Nobody ever tells me anything. I recall very distinctly a lot of people in the audience in the theater I was in when I went to see Rogue One kind of just got a little gave a little geeker squeal seeing 3PO and R2 and everything one more time. Uh and particularly in this period and everything in their history. But as I was saying, I want to talk a little bit about the politics in this film because we get a perspective that we don't often see. And that is, of course, the Rebel Alliance leadership debating amongst themselves what to do in light of the revelation of the Death Star's completion and its now use. And you've got several senators who are like, well, we've got to run, we got to disband, we've got to surrender, we've got to do this and that. We can't possibly win now. We're screwed. And then you've got others. Amongst them, you have a Calmarine admiral by the name of Radis, excuse me, who's like, we must fight. We have no alternative than to fight. And several other senators do back him, but unfortunately, it's not a unanimous decision. So that's ultimately where Jin and Cassian and the rest of them decide, well, to hell with them, to hell with the politicians, we're going anyway. But what I found interesting about that particular sequence there on Yavin is we always assumed that the rebels were more or less united in what they were in their objectives. But in this particular instance, they're divided because they feel like, well, there's hope. The situation is completely and utterly hopeless. It's only hopeless if you give up. And that's honestly what several of the rebel leaders do. They just flat out give up. And you're like, well, you came this far. Why not go the rest of the way? Even if you lose or you're defeated, at least you tried. Now, I know ultimately the plan does succeed that Jen and Cassian cook up to get to Scarif, to get to the base, and to ultimately um, get the plans to the Death Star. But it takes a bunch of foot soldiers, people who are in any type of command position, to ultimately push the rest of the rebels into action. It takes a single rebel admiral to get the rest of the bunch off their asses and get them moving. It's funny how that often works. Now, on the opposite side of things with the Empire, what you see from the Empire is you see a lot of, not so much infighting, but you see a lot of rivalry. And that, of course, is depicted by Ben Mendelsohn's portrayal as Orson Krennic, and of course, the actor who was the body double for Grand Moff Tarkin. which was originally played by the late Peter Cushing. Now, I do want to address something that I know a lot of people have discussed in the past. And I want to give my perspective on it here. How did I feel about them digitally reconstructing Peter Cushing's face and overlaying it onto the other actor's face to have Grand Moff Tarkin in this film? I think they had not yet perfected the face replacement technology yet, but I think for where they were at, it looked very good. Now, speaking about that ethically, so long as they got permission from Peter Cushing's estate or his family or whatever the case may be, and they were also appropriately compensated, I don't have a problem with them doing face replacement or other digital work for an actor that's now deceased, so long as it serves the plot of the story. Now, in this instance, they wanted to have Grand Moff Tarkin in this movie for the few scenes that he's in. For one, to establish continuity, but also to have that rivalry between himself and director Krennic. And honestly, I found that particular aspect of the film very engaging because by its own nature, the Empire itself does breed competition. It does breed rivalry. And I have to admit, it was interesting to see how that played out. Now, of course, as I mentioned, we do have two appearances by Lord Vader. This guy right back here behind me. And in one particular scene, he's talking to Director Krennic at his fortress on Mustafar. And I do want to address that briefly. How did I feel about seeing Vader's castle on Mustafar? How did I feel about it then, as I can recall, and how do I feel about it now? Then I was like, oh, I know who lives there. I even know what planet this is, even without them putting the little name thing at the bottom of the screen. I was like, that's Mustafar. There's only one person who would be on this planet, and there's only one person who would have a castle or a fortress built like that. Vader. And I had to admit, the scenes with Vader, while brief and appropriately so, I feel, because you don't want to have Vader overtake the story. It's good to have him in there. Don't misunderstand me. It's awesome to see him because any chance you get to see Vader on screen, whether it's in live action or animation, if you're a Star Wars fan, you know. You just, that's, it oozes death. It oozes Star Wars. But I will freely admit to you all here and now, I did chuckle at the dad joke. When Krennic says to Vader, so I'm still in command and you'll speak to the Emperor, and he stops speaking and you hear that very noticeable audio trigger, for lack of a better term. And Vader is choking Krennic. And he turns around and you see his one hand just like he did in episode 4, choking that smarmy Imperial officer's throat. And he says that line, "Do not choke on your aspirations, director." And then lets him go and walks off. I know it's a dad joke. I know it may be regarded as cringy as all hell, but even to this day, I still laugh. I do. I absolutely positively laugh. Now, that of course brings us to Vader's other scene. Now, minus him being on the bridge of his star destroyer, the now famous, or if you prefer, infamous hallway scene when the rebels are escaping from the flagship. They've got the plans to the Death Star in hand, and they're trying to get through that hatch. And then you see the hallway go dark. You hear that creak as the door is ripped off its hinges. And then you hear the iconic sound, Vader's breathing. And then you see the crimson red blade ignite. The music cues up. The rebels are like, "Open fire!" And he deflects every single blast. He's ripping rebels to pieces. He's ripping their blasters out of their hands. He is literally lifting them up in the air and casting them aside. He's hacking them to pieces. He takes that one rebel, lifts him up in the air, crushes his throat, and then casts him aside. And sitting there in the theater and sitting here today, I had the same reaction. I've even watched that clip a few dozen times, if not more, on YouTube. And there's something hauntingly brutal. There's something almost hypnotically beautiful about that sequence because it's Darth Vader as we had always wanted to see him. See him at the peak of his power, at the peak of his ability, at the peak of his rage. He is going to get those plans and nothing will stand in his way to do it. And I, for one, thoroughly, and I mean thoroughly, love the entire sequence just as much as I did when his son, Luke Skywalker, had his own hallway sequence at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian. But as I said, putting those two scenes aside, minus Vader, does, and I do want to revisit this question, does this movie hold up if you remove Vader, if you remove Tarkin from the scenario? Or even putting Tarkin back in. If you remove Vader, does this movie hold up without his appearances? And the answer is, at least from my perspective, yes. Yes, it does. And I want to qualify my remarks. The reason why I feel this movie holds up since its release in 2015 to now 2022 is not so much because it is tied so closely to the original trilogy and is a epilogue in some ways to the prequel trilogy. The performances by the actors and the actresses in this film, they are, I think, very well done. They give the impression of the stakes of the universe, of the world that these people live in, that the light of the Jedi has been all but extinguished, but yet that there is still hope, and that this hope is, in fact, the Rebel Alliance, a group that itself is trying to find its own direction, trying to find its way, trying to figure out how to combat an evil so massive and so oppressive as the Empire. That Sidious and so many others that came before him work to create this little ragtag band of senators and soldiers and people who just wanted to stand up to a tyrant, to an empire, and say, we will not let liberty die this easily. And I think that is a noble and a wonderful and an awesome thing. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we as Americans did it a little over 200 years ago. But I think this film speaks to something inside all of us. It asks the question, how far would I or would we be willing to go for the cause of liberty, for the cause of freedom? So, and I want to say hello to the chat. Marcus Cruz. Marcus, it has been a little while. I hope you're doing well and happy May the 4th. And I'll bring up your comment here. I feel sorry for Vader, to be honest. How many times did he attempt to go back to the light only because he was a slave to the dark side? He could not let go. Eventually, he was able to, Marcus, if you, obviously, as you know, for any of us who know the Star Wars saga, eventually Anakin got his redemption. But to kind of get back to my point, this movie demonstrates that for the right cause and for the right reasons, even the smallest, most insignificant person not only can make a difference, but is willing to risk it all for the cause of freedom and for the cause of liberty. And that's what the members of Rogue One did. And you feel it with each death, whether it's a named character or a random soldier, whether it's K2SO or Jen and Cassian knelt there on that beach. Each time a member of Rogue One dies, you feel it. But at the same time, even though they died, they succeeded. And I think what is truly special about this film is that it gives an added layer to when Luke makes that 1 in a million shot at the end of A New Hope and destroys the Death Star. Not only do the rebels destroy that terrible weapon, but Galen Erso gets his redemption as well. He gets his victory. He gets his revenge, though it might be posthumously. And for the first time in the aftermath of that victory and the destruction of the Death Star, no matter how horrific and how horrible the Empire's wrath would be, the rebels proved that a ragtag group of freedom fighters could take on an empire, and ultimately they could win. And in this instance, they did. As it said in the end of the novelization of Return of the Jedi, the Empire is defeated. Long live the Alliance. But, with all that, with all those points, with all that being said, just speaking as purely as a Star Wars fan, do I love Rogue One? Yes. Yes, I do. It sits on within my collection in a very appropriate place. In between the PT and the OT. Between the prequels and the original trilogy. And someday, maybe down the road, when I get the opportunity to do so, I will visit Solo, a Star Wars story. Because at the time, I just didn't have the opportunity to watch the movie in theaters. I know it wasn't because I was boycotting anything, well, specifically The Last Jedi. It was simply because I didn't have the time to sit down and watch it. So maybe for next May the 4th, I'll do a review, or maybe I'll even do a watch party for Solo, a Star Wars story. But I don't want to belabor these points too long. I don't want to keep you all too long because I know there are other channels out there, fellow channels and everything, who are also doing their own May the 4th streams as well. I believe that Tim of Tim's Talk is also doing a May the 4th stream this evening. So, but I did want to share my thoughts with you all on Rogue One. Does it deserve its place in the annals of the Star Wars saga? Yes. Yes, it does. Is it an homage to the things that we love about Star Wars? Yes. Does it add perspective to the universe? Does it add some richness to it? Absolutely. But before I go, I do want to share one other thing. For those of you who know or might not know, we got the second teaser or full trailer, or the second trailer for the Obi-Wan series. And I think that'll be coming out later this month. And I want to show it real quick and then give you all my reaction to it. There it is. So, and then we will probably we'll wrap her up. So, okay, hang on. I want to at least get through the. All right, hang on. I need to set this up. Oh, for Pete's sakes, no. All right, hang on here 1 second. Share screen, audio, Chrome, Kenobi, sure. All right, should be up. Yep, there it is. All right, here we go. Obi-Wan Kenobi, trailer 2.
They're coming. Stay hidden, or we will not survive. Leave us alone. When the time comes, he must be trained. Like you trained his father? You still want Kenobi. He's gone.
Maybe you've been looking in the wrong places. I want every lowlife and bounty hunter to squeeze him. You can't run Obi-Wan! You can't escape him!
To say I am hyped for this is an understatement. To say I am excited for this is an understatement. Will I be doing a review for Kenobi once it drops? Yes. Yes, I will. I will most certainly be doing. I am very interested to see what they do with the series. I know there have been people that have expressed their reservations about a potential rematch or revisit between Obi-Wan and Vader. But I understand those hesitations. I understand where people are coming from there. And I will not debate the point because they are allowed to have their perspective. I will say this. For me, this series is another part of what I call the new EU, the new expanded universe. And I will give it a chance to see how it plays out. I will say that one line between, or that one exchange between Owen and Obi-Wan, Owen hit him on the chin, and I can't say Owen was necessarily wrong. But as we know, Obi-Wan would obviously go on to guide Luke, at least initially, and Luke would eventually find his way. So I am enthusiastic for the Kenobi series, and I will reserve judgment to see where it stands in the Star Wars universe. Is it another Mandalorian, or is it another Last Jedi? Time will tell. But folks, that all being said, thank you all for tuning in tonight. As always, if you be sure to leave your comments down below on anything that I discussed this evening in terms of Rogue One or Kenobi or whatever the case may be. You all have a wonderful May the 4th. Tomorrow is Revenge of the 5th. And remember what one very wise and shrewd Sith Lord said. Fear. Fear is my ally. Fear attracts the fearful, the strong, the weak, the innocent, the corrupt. Fear is my ally. I will see you all later this week. Me and the Council of Ones will be back with another installment in our Babylon 5 review series. We'll be covering the episode Darkness Ascending. And I will be back. I will be live this Saturday night at 7:30 Central Time with my series review for Moon Knight. So, that all being said, folks, have a wonderful week. I will see you all next time. Stay ambassadorial. And this is the Ambassador, signing off.